right, hey there. In this video, we're going to be talking about types of evidence, specifically in a very easy to remember acronym called SHAAPE, SHAAAPE. This is not something that I came up with myself, but over my years as an English teacher, had several different colleagues use this, and I kind of adopted it as well because it's a great acronym to help you identify and select types of evidence. So there's kind of two ways that this is going to be important for you. One, if you're going to be writing an evidence-based persuasive paper or even an informational paper, and you're going to have to research, you're going to read a lot of different articles, and you don't want to pull opinions out of those articles or analysis out of those articles unless it's just to inform you of maybe some of the things you could argue. What you're going to want to pull out of those articles is evidence. And you use that evidence as a reinforcement for the arguments that you might make in your own paper. Secondly, of course, then, understanding the different types of evidence helps you to be more selective when you choose what kind of evidence you're going to actually include in your paper, because not all evidence is as strong as other types of evidence, and you might actually have a pretty weak paper if you choose all one kind of evidence, especially if it's a weaker kind of evidence. So we're going to quickly go through the acronym SHAAAPE to help you not only know the different kinds of evidence that are out there, and again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are very common types of evidence that you're going to find. Number one, the S is for statistics, like data, studies, research, anything dealing with numbers or results of something, even if it's just a survey, but it might be a study. So again, that's a pretty solid, strong piece of evidence because usually, especially if it's from a peer-reviewed article, when you get into statistics and data and numbers and those kinds of things, that kind of evidence kind of stands out as a more logical, reasoned approach or argument based on numbers and research. The H is hypothetical. So this is an idea or an example that's made up, but it's plausible. It seems like possible. So you've come up with a hypothetical situation to help kind of convince someone or express an idea. But again, it's limited in terms of the strength of the evidence because it's made up. It's hypothetical. Now, it might logically, to someone reading it, seem like, yeah, that seems like it could be real. But a paper based solely on hypothetical evidence doesn't really have as much grounding in reality as other kinds of evidence that you might find. So hypothetical situation is a type of evidence. The first A is authority. So authority would be if you are referencing maybe a doctor, a scientist, a researcher, or some other expert in the field that you're covering in this essay. Now, again, authority has limitations as well because this is how people sell ads. So a sports figure might be called in to be an authority on a sports drink, but they might not know anything beyond like, this drink makes me feel refreshed. And so you have to choose and evaluate your authority carefully so that this authority actually carries weight with the types of evidence. So you don't want to quote someone that is speaking to a subject matter that they're not really valid in terms of being able to speak to it. So that's authority. The other A is allusion with an A, allusion. And that's where you are comparing one thing to a famous person, a famous character in maybe literature or mythology, or you're saying this person is like this or this time period is like this. You're alluding to something historical, whether it's a person, place, thing, event of that sort. Again, there will be parallels, but allusions only hold up so far. It has to be a pretty solid connection in terms of some of the basics or some of the themes or some of the elements, but they only hold up so much because you're comparing one thing to something different. That's an allusion. A is analogy, and it's sort of like a hypothetical, but you're not actually creating something new. An analogy is like a generic allusion of sorts. So you might be comparing two things. Like writing poetry is like riding a bike, and you've created this analogy in terms of your evidence. And so the similarities, you're kind of juxtaposing or putting these two things side by side, drawing comparisons and analogies, comparisons and similarities and differences between the two. And that's an analogy. But again, there's limitations to the strength of an analogy because of the fact that it's two different things and you're just looking for some parallels to kind of undergird your argument. The P is personal experience, whether it's your own or it's the testimony of someone else. So personal experience, also called an anecdote. Personal experience, again, it has the limitations of the person and their mental state of mind, their perspective, their knowledge of their situation. If you think about, when we think about ethos, pathos, and logos, which is credibility, ethos, pathos is your kind of the passion, the feelings and emotions involved. Logos is a more systematic, reasonable laying out of an argument. And a personal experience oftentimes is more emotional or feelings based because it's one person's perspective or experience. And again, that might be very limited when we talk about evidence because that's just one person. Doesn't mean that even applies in terms of experience to a wide range of a population. So that's personal experience. You want to be careful with those as well. A whole essay based on personal experience examples is not going to be really logically sound, perhaps. It's going to be more feelings based. And then the E is an example. When you're basically bringing in, maybe an example could be just a cultural knowledge that people just know from living in the world socially. It could be an example from a magazine or a textbook. It can be a historical situation that you're bringing it in to kind of back up your argument. All right, so there it is, SHAPE, SHAAAPE. Once you start to go into articles and identifying those types of evidence, you can now be more selective and, I guess, logical and reasonable about what choices you make to put in the essays that you would be writing so that you have a balanced and, I guess, well thought out sampling of different types of evidence in your writing. So hopefully that was helpful as you go and do research and other things to start to take apart articles and actually create your own writing, that keeping those types of evidence in mind are quite valuable. We'll see you soon. Well, hey, if this is your first experience with this channel, I want to let you know that there's a lot of information here that could be very helpful. I would love it if you'd subscribe to the channel right here. This is going to be a playlist of other things that have to do with writing, whether it's sentence construction, sentence types, that kind of thing. Also annotating, rhetorical triangle, all of that kind of stuff. This might be a playlist that has to do with rhetorical devices, other things AP related that might be of use for you. And then maybe some samples of the books that I have read. I have a lot of audiobooks of different typical classroom kind of novels. Also, I have some analysis videos of books like 1984. So lots here, as well as some fun stuff because, life is no more than just books. It's fun too. All right. Thanks a lot.